Our eyes reflect our lives, don't they? I can see as well as you can. I can feel everything you feel. In fact, I can feel exactly what you feel.
He said he's a mirror for me. I need to know where the hell he came from.
The same blood runs through our veins.
It was as if part of me had been stolen.
I can feel your hunger.
I must deactivate you. Why? Because you are dangerous.
Look in the mirror. See yourself.
I'm a mirror for you as well.
Don't be so vain. Set a course for Earth. Kill everything.
Rewatch Podcast presents the Star Trek Film Series Rewatch. Join us each week as we head into the final frontier aboard the Starship Enterprise. Send your thoughts to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Join us at our Facebook page, facebook.com/rewatchpodcast, and follow us on Twitter @rewatchpod.
Today we're discussing Star Trek Nemesis, starring Patrick Stewart, Jonathan Frakes, Brent Spiner, LeVar Burton, Michael Dorn, Gates McFadden, Marina Sirtis, Tom Hardy, and Ron Perlman. Directed by Stuart Baird? Welcome back to the Star Trek Film Series Rewatch. I'm Corey, and my voice shall echo through time long after yours has faded to a dim memory.
Such a serious line, isn't it? And this is Nathan. Now move, puny human animal.
I get the serious line, you get the silly line.
I know. What's going on with this week's intro? That's all right. I didn't write it, did I?
Okay, so Nathan, we're here. We're talking about the last of the TNG movies, Nemesis. So what's your history with it?
Well, let me just say right off the bat that there's a small tear in my eye going down my cheek as we speak, because as I said, this is the last time we're going to be with this crew. So, and yeah, like my history with this film is, oh God, I remember seeing it at the movies. I remember not minding it too much. It was kind of interesting revisiting it. I'm looking forward to kind of getting into a thorough kind of discussion with you about it. But at the time, I remember this movie did come out. When did it come out, actually? It was in 2002. And this is the 10th film in the Star Trek series. So I know for a fact that this film didn't do as well as the rest of the film. So possibly a little bit of, series kind of fatigue with this one. I remember this movie just kind of came and went. I don't really remember too much about it at the time. What about you?
Well, as for me, this, like pretty much all the other ones we've watched so far, this is the second time I've watched it. But I do remember seeing this heavily advertised at the cinema. Like, they had huge displays, posters, banners, everything, the whole shebang for this movie. And we're going to get into it in the trivia, but there was a lot more out at the time that I was dying to see.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. And when we get into the trivia and we find out like some of the films that this movie was opening against, it actually doesn't feel like that long ago. Like it was 2002. Yes, it was 13 years ago, man. But the films that it was up against, man, they like in my mind, I remember seeing them at the movies, and they were all like event cinema, especially one of them in particular, which we'll get to.
But first, for those who haven't watched, I guess I should get into a bit of a synopsis.
Sounds good. Good luck.
Yes. So, during a Senate meeting, the entire Romulan Council is murdered by a weaponized virus. Meanwhile, it is a day long awaited, the marriage of Will Riker and Deanna Troi. And on their way to their Beta Z ceremony and honeymoon, the Enterprise is sent near the neutral zone to Romulan space, where they discover a prototype twin of the android Data named B4. They continue their mission to Romulus to meet with the new Praetor Shinzon, a human cloned from Captain Picard by the Romulans, but who was later sent to die in the dilithium mines of Remus. Then the crew detects a break-in on their system by B4. Picard is captured by Shinzon and his Riemann brothers, as Shinzon needs Picard's genetic material to save himself from a limited lifespan. Picard and the Enterprise escape, only to find themselves battling Shinzon's cloaked and untraceable ship, which he intends to take to Earth and destroy the planet, sending the Federation into disarray. Unable to detach himself from his hatred of Picard and accepting his inevitable death, Shinzon loses focus. Regardless of the Enterprise being crippled, Picard refuses to admit defeat and sets a collision course with Shinzon. Picard faces off with his alter ego and ultimately impales Shinzon, and he dies. But Shinzon's weapon is active and ready to fire when Data appears on board and uses a portable transporter to beam Picard to safety, then sacrifices his life to destroy the weapon. The crew toasts to absent friends while Riker leaves the Enterprise to take on his own command, and B4 shows signs that he too could strive to find his own humanity.
Did you shed a tear when Data died?
Nope.
You didn't? you were happy to see it happen?
I wasn't happy to see it happen, but I wasn't tearing up over it either. So let's get into some trivia here.
Yes. Now, this is actually the lowest grossing Star Trek film in the history of the franchise, and as we were kind of mentioning before about some of the films that we were perhaps anticipating slightly more, Nemesis was actually released on December 13, 2002, and in direct competition with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the 20th James Bond film, Die Another Day. These were all released on, like, Chamber of Secrets was November 15, 2002, Die Another Day was November 22, and the big one, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, which was released on December 18. And the film's gross domestic income was the lowest of the franchise of $43 million, and it actually opened at number 2 in the US box office. And it actually was the first Trek film not to debut as the highest grossing film of the week. It actually earned a total of $67,312,826 worldwide against a production budget of $60 million.
It barely made its budget back in the box office.
I can't believe they kind of went up against those titans, those ginormous franchises, and thought they were going to win out in that crowded marketplace. I mean, I know Star Trek is a big property, but going off the box office receipts for all the previous films, don't get me wrong, they were successful, but not a lot of them were like hit out of the park, $500 million kind of movies. Like Harry Potter's a $500 million movie. Lord of the Rings is as well. I'm not too sure what Die Another Day did. The film wasn't very good, but I'm sure it did huge business.
Yeah, exactly. That's like I was saying. There was so much more that I would rather be seeing than the 10th Star Trek movie. And not that I'd seen any of the Star Trek movies before, but Harry Potter had hit with such an amazing thud. I mean, that did huge numbers. So to have the sequel, which was released 1 year later, as we said, on November 15th of 2002, it's impossible to go up against it. And then you add Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, to that.
Oh, man.
The massively awaited sequel to Fellowship.
Without veering too far off course, like, do you remember how anticipated The Two Towers was?
It was huge.
It was like The Fellowship of the Ring was so good. Like, it was such a great film, and Two Towers is arguably a better film than Fellowship. At the time, like, I remember watching that movie on Boxing Day in Australia. I think I was at the Orpheum over at Mossman watching it, and like that's event cinema. If there was ever the definition of event cinema, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is that film.
Exactly right. And it's like you said, Die Another Day wasn't an excellent film. Still a James Bond film. Huge anticipation there. And I think I saw that one in the theater as well.
Yeah, I think I did too. Was that the one with Madonna? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, is that the one when the car went invisible and was on the ice or something like that? I think that.
Yeah. Rosamund Pike was the Bond girl.
God, man, and going back a little bit, aren't we?
But yeah, so this saturated market, they probably thought doing another Star Trek movie was a good idea. James Bond's in its 20th movie, and then both Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings were putting out sequels, so why not hit on a big franchise of theirs? And at this point, like, who cared, Everybody wanted the fantasy. They wanted the Harry Potter. They wanted Lord of the Rings, So Rick Berman, who was the executive producer of this film, actually blamed the low performance on the saturated market. And sure, that's probably a large contributor to it. But at the same time, like, it was years since the last one. I mean, like, I'm talking like 3-4 years since Insurrection had been out. I mean, that's a huge gap between them. That's the longest gap between any Star Trek film since they started making them back, what was it, 78?
Yeah, that's right. And if you actually watch this movie, all of the Next Generation cast are starting to age very considerably. Like like Riker in particular he was looking his age a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, it's true.
What else is there? The review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes actually gave this film a rating of 37% based on 157 reviews. So from a critic perspective, not the most loved Star Trek film in the world. Not a total hater on this movie.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see. But in the meantime, going back to budget, $60 million budget here, which it barely made back. Patrick Stewart was paid nearly as much for this movie as he was for his entire run on TNG.
I mean,
and that's, you got to expect that. Patrick Stewart is huge. At this point, he'd already played Xavier in the first X-Men film. They were working on the second one, which was probably also looking at a more anticipated release than any Star Trek movie.
Just quickly, is X-Men really that long ago?
2000 was the first.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're getting close to the release of X2. So you can understand that Patrick Stewart would demand a larger salary. So, 7 years on a TV show, take his cumulative salary, and that's how much he got paid to do this movie. It's craziness.
when you actually think about Patrick Stewart's career as an actor, like, he's got two iconic roles. Obviously, Jean-Luc Picard and Professor Xavier in the X-Men movies. Like, obviously, his pedigree as an actor, like, he's a really highly thought of Shakespearean trained actor. You know what, man? Not a bad career if you ask me.
No, not at all.
Did very well. In an interview given years after the film came out, Tom Hardy said that he actually took the film role very, very seriously, as it was intended to be his big break. The commercial failure of the film and the response from longtime fans apparently led to his relationship dissolving, him turning to alcohol and actually considering suicide. It was only when he put himself together and starred in the amazing film Bronson, not an easy film to watch, that he actually got over the failure of this film.
Honestly, I didn't even realize it was Tom Hardy the first time I watched this film, and that wasn't long ago.
You know what, man? Tom Hardy has kind of evolved into this actor that is just his own creation. Like, he's in the same kind of pedigrees like a Michael Fassbender and that kind of style of actor that can almost do almost anything and pull it off and make it succeed, and makes really interesting film choices, but doesn't really mind appearing in a ginormous blockbuster when it kind of suits him. Like, he's a quality actor. Like, I think he's very, very good. Like, he was great in wasn't he in Inception as well? He was in the Nolan film. Yeah. And he's very, very good. And he clearly is taking this role very seriously, and truthfully, and I'm not trying to be mean or nasty, but maybe a bit too seriously.
I can agree, and it's interesting that he would go to Bronson as the film that sort of brought him back around, because he'd actually done a few other big movies between this and by the time he was doing Bronson. He showed up in Rock and Roller. He was in Sucker Punch.
And you know what, man, Rock and Roll is a good film. Sucker Punch, not so much, but yeah. Yeah, but there's some kind of good movies in there, isn't there?
Yeah, Inception, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Lawless. Of course, he was a very controversial choice to play Bane in Dark Knight Rises.
Yep.
So, and then even the last few years, movies like The Drop and of course Mad Max. So it's interesting that he would say that Bronson was the one that sort of brought him back around from his alcoholism.
Yeah, he was also in Layer Cake and Sweeney Todd.
But yeah, Inception was probably the one where I really started to recognize him. Then, of course, The Dark Knight tipped him over the edge. And now, of course, he's a huge commodity.
Keep in mind, a lot of his casting was based on the fact that, they intentionally were trying to find somebody that looked like Jean-Luc Picard, or Patrick Stewart, I should say, because, without giving too much away, a bit of a spoiler alert if you haven't watched it, but Tom Hardy is essentially playing a cloned version of Patrick Stewart in this film. So they had to try and find somebody that kind of looked like him. And I thought they did a pretty good job. I could kind of see it a bit. Obviously there are differences, but I could kind of see it, couldn't you?
Oh, yeah, I can see it, but we'll get into what I think of it when we get into our main discussion.
Fair enough.
Getting into the other cast, the long-running cast, like Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis, and LeVar Burton, they all criticized the director, Stuart Baird, over what he did with this movie, because it's like I said in my introduction there, Stuart Baird?
Stuart Baird is an editor by trade. He was an editor on and truthfully, a very renowned, very capable craftsman as far as editing is concerned. Superman, Lethal Weapon 2, Die Hard 2, Last Boy Scout, Demolition Man, Superman 2, Casino Royale, Edge of Darkness, Green Lantern, Skyfall, 47 Ronin. So as far as editing gear is concerned and actually being able to cut a film together, this guy absolutely knows what he's doing. No question asked. I will never question how he kind of does this. But from a direction point of view, his only 2 credits prior to Star Trek Nemesis was the sequel to The Fugitive, which was called U.S. Marshals, with Tommy Lee Jones in 1998, and he made a small film called Executive Decision with Kurt Russell in 1996 that I actually don't really remember seeing, truthfully. Have you?
No, I think I saw U.S. Marshals.
I think I saw U.S. Marshals as well, and I remember not minding it, but it's a movie that just came and went. I haven't seen it since. I probably will never watch it again. It wasn't bad. I just don't really remember it.
Yeah, and most of the cast and Stuart Baird himself have gone on the record to say that Stuart Baird knows nothing about the Star Trek TNG universe at all. He had no prior knowledge. He actually thought that the character of Geordi was an alien because of his eyes. Like, come on, this guy he couldn't do a bit of research. He couldn't track down some episodes of TNG and get a feel for it.
Do you know the thing I do find interesting, though, about this film, and maybe the film was taken away from him in post-production, because it's possible, because I actually read that there's a much longer cut of this film that's in existence. There's 50 minutes extra that they shot. They actually cut this film by a third, and all of those moments are character moments amongst the crew. Now, you could argue that most of them are superfluous and kind of not really needed and have no real kind of relationship to the story itself. But I think a longer cut of this film would have been interesting because, like, for example, and again, we'll kind of get into it more thoroughly as in our main movie discussion, but Will Wheaton is actually in this movie. He hasn't appeared in any of the Next Generation films, and at the wedding sequence at the start, you can see him at the far end of the table sitting next to some of the other crew. And they don't give him any lines or anything like that. Apparently, if you look at the deleted scenes in the DVD, there's a sequence of him talking to Picard somehow. But it's just like... So I kind of suspect that this film possibly was taken away from him in post-production where they were trying to kind of get like an action blockbuster as opposed to a character moments where... I mean, I don't know about you, man, but some of the best moments of Next Generation are the character moments. And it would have been interesting for them to expand upon that slightly more.
Exactly. That's what I say about most sci-fi, is that it needs to reflect the human condition and it needs to have good characters. You know, don't blow all your budget on the big sci-fi spectacular action movie stuff because... then you're going to lose your audience. And that's not to give too much away, but that's pretty much what this movie kind of leads you to, really.
Oh, totally. But Baird has actually, for his part, expressed his frustration to having to tell a story in an established universe with a pre-existing design and character relationships. He hated having to utilize recycled sets and props and has trouble remembering the names of the cast, as you mentioned earlier on. So, yeah, I mean, you know, we could talk about it for quite some time, but I don't know if he does a bad job. I just think it's an odd choice. Truthfully.
Yeah, well, he just doesn't know how to juggle it properly, you know, because even Michael Dorn came out and said that he was really upset with the character of Worf in this movie because really he had nothing to do.
What is it does he have? I mean, the only thing he really has to do, doesn't he go on the away mission with Picard at the start of the film when they're in that dune buggy?
That's about it.
That's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, you can understand. And, well, at the end of the day, too, Jonathan Frakes wasn't even asked to come back to direct this movie. He said he would do it if he was asked, but instead they just went with this random guy. And, yeah, why not get Jonathan Frakes?
I think this film would have been quite capable in his hands. This story would have been capable in his hands. Because going up, like, from what he did on First Contact, I mean, Insurrection, you could argue it was a bit of a misfire, but you know what? It still made money and it was still reasonably popular and critically, like, it wasn't hated, that film at all. So it would have been interesting to see where he would have gone as a filmmaker with another shot at a Star Trek film, because he would have been able to juggle those character moments and the action moments of Tom Hardy and Picard and everyone.
The other thing that I know people criticize this movie for is that they go with Romulans as the bad guy and then tie in this whole other race, which are, I guess, somehow related to Romulans, called the Remans, who are these weird vampire-y looking things, which have actually, you know, been reported to be based on the Count Orlok from the movie Nosferatu, the 1922 Nosferatu. It's strange that, you know, they would go this way because Romulans, I don't even think, made an appearance in TNG, the series, let alone any of the movies.
Keep in mind, they're trying to be clever here because the whole Romulus-Remus thing is... I mean, Romulus and Remus in folklore were the twin brothers that supposedly laid the foundation for Rome, like as in the Mecca that we know as Rome. So they're actually two kind of historical characters in real-life history. So they're trying to get all clever. And again, I've been watching Star Trek for years and years and years, and I don't recall... and them mentioning the word Reman before, I should say. You're right, they have this really weird look about them, don't they? And Ron Perlman is in this film. Such a great actor, and he's unrecognisable.
And really has nothing to do.
Not really, no. Apart from stand to the side of Shinzon and kind of just stare at him kind of with these big eyes, essentially.
It's weird. Yep. It's a weird choice.
Yep. Apparently, Nicholas Meyer was actually asked to direct, and again, I think, you know, we probably would have had more Next Generation films if that actually happened. I mean, you know, as we've discussed many times before, Nicholas Meyer directed Wrath of Khan, and he also directed The Undiscovered Country, two of the better entries in the Star Trek film series. Apparently he turned it down because Rick Berman would not let him make changes to the script, because Rick Berman actually had an agreement with John Logan, who was the scriptwriter on this film, to actually give him final approval of the script, and Nicholas Meyer didn't want to agree to that.
And a couple of alternatives here. LeVar Burton wanted to direct, which would have been interesting. You know, they'd handed the reins over to Jonathan Frakes, so why not let another seasoned actor of the show take control? That could have been interesting. And then on the other side, Jude Law was originally considered for the role of Shinzon, so that also could have been very interesting.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting, and I could see that. Didn't happen for whatever reason. A couple of cameos that appeared in this, and again, going back to the Professor Xavier discussion before in X-Men, Bryan Singer, the great director, actually makes a guest appearance. He's a crew member who actually takes Worf's place at the tactical console. Also, Kate Mulgrew, Admiral Catherine Janeway from the spin-off series Star Trek Voyager, appears as the Admiral talking to Picard in quite a lengthy sequence, actually. It's actually more than just a cameo. She's actually in there for quite a bit. Whoopi Goldberg shows up for about 2 minutes at the start of the movie, and that's about it.
Oh, not even 2 minutes, man. It was like a 30-second walk-on.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, some great trivia there. Well, let's get into our main discussion, hey?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so we start at the Romulan Senate. And again, like the last few movies we've talked about, I really cannot poo-poo on the special effects, really.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
I think they do a good job, It's obvious that it's, a CG model, but they come in on this overhead shot of this Romulan Senate, and it looks pretty good.
Oh, totally. It looks fantastic. Yeah, during the session of the Romulan Imperial Senate, the military offers the plans to actually join forces with the Reman military and invade the Federation, but the actual Praetor refuses. And let me just say, the Praetor in that sequence, and it's very distracting if you're an Australian and you grew up in the 80s and 90s watching Australian television, because the actor playing the Praetor in that sequence is a guy named Alan Dale.
Yes.
And Alan Dale was in the soap opera Neighbours for years and years and years, playing a guy named Jim Dale. And if you grew up in Australia and you were a teenager, it was very hard to avoid him as an actor on that TV show. And this guy, I mean, he's actually kind of gone on to have this really varied career, truthfully. And he's always shown up in shows like 24 and Ugly Betty and
Lost.
Lost. He was in Entourage, The West Wing, X-Files, and various other TV shows. So he's actually gone on to a very, very successful career. Sorry, his character name in Neighbours was Jim Robinson. That's right. And he was a big actor.
Yeah, and you're right. It is very distracting. And for anybody else, I mean, like, he was a huge part of Lost. He played Whitmore.
You're right.
Yeah, it's just it's interesting to see, like, this far back, Of course, we know him from Neighbours because we're both Australian, but yeah, just going this far back, and it's true. This guy just shows up in so many sci-fi properties. It's ridiculous.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Anyway, he's done very well for himself. So the Praetor refuses, and one senator actually excuses herself for a meeting, leaving behind a device that releases what appears to be some kind of green radiation of some description, or a virus of some description, which actually, it's kind of weird. As you say, man, the effects are great. It's like this little spherical thing that shoots this stuff into the air and then rains down on everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then they all, like, turn to dust or something.
Yeah, and you know what, man? The sequence reasonably gruesome, isn't it?
It is. It's a good setup for where they're going to go, It's quite a mystery to find out, because really, it's not until much later that we sort of get an explanation to what was going on there, because we're really just going to get into the wedding of Riker and Troy, and then later we're going to get all the setup with Shinzon and everything. So, it's a while before we get back to what actually happened there.
Oh, totally. And yeah, you're dead right. It takes a while to fully kind of grasp what actually occurred. So after the Romulan Senate is entirely killed off, we actually meet our USS Enterprise E crew, and they're actually all kind of collected together, preparing to bid farewell to longtime First Officer Commander William Riker and Councillor Deanna Troi, who are about to be married on Beta Z. And doesn't the scene open with this long-winded speech from Patrick Stewart?
Picard is the best man, and it was strange because I think they had like a ceremony, like a wedding ceremony on Earth, and then they were going to go and have a second ceremony on Beta Z. So it was kind of like, there's a whole thing about Deanna's mother, like she had brought up marriage with her during the series, like how she needs to find a good man and get married, and that they need to have a traditional wedding on Beta Z, which is conducted naked.
Which Worf has an issue with, doesn't he?
Yes.
I will not do it. I will not do it. And then doesn't Picard kind of just like force him and just kind of go, you will do it. We'll observe their traditions. Get over it. And doesn't he call him like a strapping young lad or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they've been called to the Kalaran system on the planet that they call Kalaris 3. They're going to go and investigate it, but after they've done that, then yes, they will get naked and partake in this Beta Z wedding. And this leads us to find a new android.
Hey, just quickly, just going back to the whole Beta Z thing. This is one of my small criticisms of where the Next Generation movies are kind of heading towards is, and we've talked about this before, about the idea of required knowledge. I mean, me and you understand it because we've watched the show, but my mum and dad wouldn't understand the whole Beta Z thing. I'm sure your mum or dad wouldn't either. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where it's like an in-joke for people that watch Star Trek. But anybody who doesn't watch Star Trek, it just goes totally over their head, and you end up kind of scratching your nose a little bit. You're just kind of going, "What's that all about?" And you just wouldn't understand it.
Why are they suddenly talking about getting naked? It's weird.
It's really, really weird, and it kind of, I wonder why this movie kind of failed a little bit. Is maybe because of the required knowledge it takes to watch this movie. I mean, if you watch Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, the required knowledge of that film is minimal. The premise is you go back in time, you need to find a whale in order to bring it into the future so you can save the future. That's essentially the thing. So you're immediately on their side. Where this film, there's required knowledge everywhere. And I'm not too sure if it really works as well as it kind of should have. Like, it would have been nice for them to simplify things just a bit.
But, we're not going to get too far into it because the mission is afoot. So they go to this planet, and this sequence down on Kalaris 3 is very unusual for this kind of movie. They go with this, like, way oversaturated look.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It looks strange.
So, I don't know. It's like he wanted to, like, convey an alien planet. So, I don't know. So he changes the light somehow.
Yeah.
It is very tropey.
And doesn't the ship kind of land on the planet, and then the kind of doors open, and the way the camera's viewed, you don't really know what's about to happen, and then without any warning whatsoever, this buggy that looks like it's something out of Mad Max just flies out, and Picard is actually driving, isn't he?
For some reason he needs both Data and Worf with him because of what's going to happen later. They're going to run into the locals, so they need Picard driving. They need Data giving direction, and then they need Worf on the turret at the back.
Yeah, I know.
Shooting at them for this big action sequence. But the big thing is that, the reason they were there was that they detected this energy. What was it, like prototronic energy or something like that? It's what Data gives off, So that's the reason they were there, and they find this, like an earlier version, like a prototype of Data.
Haven't we been down this path before? Didn't they do this storyline in Next Generation with the whole Lore character?
It's strange that they would go with a new character of B4. Why couldn't it have just been Lore?
Oh, I actually can't really remember exactly what happened to Lore. Maybe he died or something like that, maybe, but it does feel a little bit forced because they're implying that, is it Dr. Noonien Singh? Is he the doctor that actually created Data? I think that's it. And so they're implying that there were several different prototypes kind of made, and B4 is kind of one of those. And they find this robot, they put it together, and then all of a sudden the conundrum kind of begins of, Data kind of sort of saying that B4, you're my brother, and that's his storyline for the film, essentially.
Yeah, I just think it would have been more interesting if it was Lore. I mean, like, I can't really remember what happened to him either in the series, but at the end of the day, B4 is all in pieces all over this whole area. So, why can't you just have that have happened to Lore,
Yeah, that's right.
And it would have been more interesting, and tying up a loose end from the series of, can this, what is essentially an evil twin of Data, sort of come around and also find his humanity the way Data has been doing.
Yes, that's right.
This whole time. You know, it would have been far more interesting and tied into the series nicely.
After they get B4, they bring it back to the Enterprise, they put it together, Data kind of is talking to it, and they work out that they need to conduct more tests and do all that kind of stuff. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Picard receives a transmission from Vice Admiral Catherine Janeway, who actually orders the crew to conduct a diplomatic mission to Romulus. Now, again, required learning, like Catherine Janeway, she was the captain of Voyager that ran for 7 seasons, that just wrapped up kind of production. So it's a big deal that she kind of appears in a Next Generation movie. But if you don't know, then she's just another character, isn't she?
Exactly right. As far as anybody else who doesn't know Star Trek at all, she is just some random.
It's just some random. Janeway actually informs Picard that the Romulan government has undergone a military coup and is now controlled by a Reman named Shinzon. And Shinzon is actually saying that he wants peace with the Federation and to bring freedom to Remus. This is actually a very surprising development, as the Romulans had always regarded Remans as an undesirable caste, used principally as slave labour and shock troops during the Dominion War. Some more required learning from Deep Space Nine. If you haven't watched Deep Space Nine, you'd have no idea what the Dominion War is.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, not having watched Deep Space Nine, you have thankfully explained to me what the Dominion War is.
Yeah.
In the past couple of discussions that we've had. So, you know, the first time I watched this, I didn't know that. So again, you know, another dropped line from something that is kind of required learning from the previous series. But still, we are introducing this random race of aliens called the Remans, and no one's ever heard of them, but we're getting back to the story that was set up, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't mind the Remans. Like, I know you said that Ron Perlman didn't really have a whole lot to do, but from a story perspective, he had a lot to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, he kind of guided Shinzon quite a lot in this, but it felt a bit forced, didn't it?
It did. You know, they play a bit of cloak and dagger here with Shinzon at the beginning, because first, Ron Perlman shows up as a Reman, and they mistake him for Shinzon, and he seems kind of offended by that. Where he's just like, I'm not Shinzon, I'm the viceroy to Shinzon. And then he's very curt with them and just tells them, come, just, you know, here are the coordinates, come over.
Doesn't the ship appear out of nowhere as well? Like, they're kind of cruising along, then out of nowhere this ship decloaks, and they have no idea that it's there. And you know, I actually think that's probably one of the more positive things to come out of this movie, is that I actually thought the ship, the Reman ship with Shinzon on it, was pretty cool. I thought it looked pretty cool, and it was a pretty badass ship, man. Like, its shields were crazy, the cloak system was out of control, and the design wasn't too bad either. So I thought there was actually a little bit of menace there, which was nice.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to get down on the CGI for this movie. It's very good. You know, so they all go over to meet with Shinzon. And again, they're going to keep him in shadow while he sort of, I don't know what he really does here. He sort of acts a bit menacing, but not really, because he's trying to, like, trick them into believing that he wants peace.
He's also got a bit of a long game in the back of his mind too, like, because the idea is that they want to kind of take out a planet, don't they, essentially, without giving too much of away, and they want to use the ship as a weapon. But Shinzon needs Picard to kind of save his own personal future a little bit, and he's trying to lure Picard to him, isn't he?
Yes. So they go through this whole thing about how he is human and he's somehow become praetor of Romulus. Now, they don't really get into like how the Romulans came to trust this plan of his, because really they just cut to the Romulans every now and again. They're just like, you assured us, Shinzon, that this was the reason. I'm just like, why'd you listen to him in the first place? It seems like you hate him, like even more than you hate Remans. Like, why are you listening to this guy at all?
Isn't there some woman Romulan that tries to, like, get closer to Shinzon, and doesn't she like touch him? And he gets really upset, doesn't he? Doesn't he go, don't you dare touch me, I shall put you in your place, kind of thing.
Yeah, filthy Romulan, how dare you touch me? And oh man, like it makes no sense that they're listening to him. Yeah. But whatever. And of course, it's revealed that he is a clone of Picard. I don't understand why he's bald. Later they have this moment where Picard's looking at a picture of himself taken when he was in Starfleet.
Yeah.
Right? And they've got Tom Hardy as Shinzon with that look, for the photo of young Picard.
Yeah.
I'm just like, he's not bald though.
No.
Like Picard is bald, but he's still got like hair, around the sides.
Yeah, that's right.
So why is he completely bald when he was in his 20s or 30s? Like,
I don't know.
It makes no sense. The reason he's bald now is because he's old. He's gotten old. His hair's fallen out.
Plus, he looks like a total badass as a bald dude as well. Like, he's the best looking bald guy ever. He's fantastic.
Yeah. So not only is Shinzon bald, but Picard was bald when he was in his 20s. So I don't. It's just a ridiculous thing.
I'm not too sure it was entirely needed, the whole Picard clone thing. Like, I thought Shinzon as a character could have existed in his own kind of domain without being so close to Picard. You could have had him as a very reputable character and still had the same storyline take place. And the whole clone thing feels a bit strange, and obviously it kind of places a little bit of kind of intrigue in it, because there's actually a pretty interesting sequence, because once they kind of reveal that Picard is actually Shinzon is actually a clone of Picard, doesn't Shinzon invite Picard to dinner the next night? And they actually do. They actually have dinner together, which I thought was a bit interesting. It should have been like these two great actors kind of coming off against each other, and it just felt a bit strange, that sequence, I thought.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I can think of two better things to do here. Shinzon could have just been a Reman. Like, the Remans could have just been the bad guy. If you're going to go to all this trouble of creating a whole race of people who are hated by the Romulans, who in turn hate the Romulans as well, and have this whole scheme to sort of use them to bring down the Federation, then that would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Could have had Ron Perlman in the role. That would have been great.
Oh man, that would have been great.
Yeah. On the other side, if you are going to go with this whole clone Picard thing, have Patrick Stewart play it.
Hey, just quickly, I just want to go off topic for 2 seconds. Ron Perlman plays. There's a really great film out there that was made in 95 or 96 called The City of Lost Children. It's a French film made by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who directed Amélie and A Very Long Engagement, and he actually made Alien Resurrection as well. But he made Delicatessen too, and Ron Perlman is in this movie. Look it up, try and find it. It's an amazing movie. It's truly one of my favorites. And Ron Perlman, he speaks French throughout the whole film, and it's fantastic. Go and watch it.
Awesome, will do.
Do it.
But yeah, that's two better ideas right here. I think it would have been great, especially when we find out that B4 was working for Shinzon. He sort of programmed him to do his bidding for him. So then you could have had like a face-off between two Patrick Stewarts and then two Datas as well.
Yeah, totally.
That would have been epic. Like Patrick Stewart versus Patrick Stewart. I mean, that's an ultimate fight right there.
Yeah. And anyway, we'll kind of get more into it. But where are we up to? The crew discovers that the Scimitar is actually emitting low levels of extremely dangerous Thalaron radiation, the same radiation used to assassinate the Romulan Senate. Several unauthorized computer accesses also take place aboard the Enterprise, and Troy is actually mentally attacked by Shinzon while she's having sexual intercourse with Riker. Speaking of somebody that doesn't understand Star Trek, Stuart Baird, that felt like a really strange sequence, don't you think?
It really did. It's like I was saying, it's like a long-awaited part of this series to see Riker and Troy get married. So in the scene where they are going to go ahead and consummate that marriage, you have Troy get mentally raped. I mean, come on. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I don't quite understand. I mean, I just... it's almost like they're playing games a little bit, aren't they? And it felt really unnecessary why that was deemed, like, other than to give Deanna Troi something to do in the movie, it felt like a really odd choice from a narrative perspective to actually have Shinzon mentally attack her through Ron Perlman's character.
And yeah, the interaction between the Riemann, Ron Perlman's Riemann, and Shinzon, like, where he sort of like sits on the ground and Ron Perlman puts his hands on his head.
Yeah, that's it.
And like projects his mental state across into Troi. Like, what?
Yeah, I know.
It's bizarre.
It didn't really work for me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I found Deanna Troi's acting, I thought it was fine. I thought she reacted in a reasonably effective kind of way. Like she was clearly upset and very, very shocked by the encounter, but I'm not too sure the direction was there to really have that, like it should have been like a really important moment, and the moment should have been very crucial to the storyline, and I don't really feel like it was. Yeah. Plus, also the sex scene between Riker and Troi was weird. It was just weird to begin with. Like, Riker's like this old dude, you know. Anyway, it's all good. It's just a strange thing.
Yeah. Long story short, this serves for Troi to get over it quickly and then decide to just fight back. So she goes into into his mind and gets like the whole plan. And the plan is kidnap Picard and then destroy Earth.
Yeah, that's right. So Shinzon actually captures Picard after Beverly Crusher, who has nothing to do in this movie, has informed him. So her and Worf should just sit on the sidelines and do nothing, yeah? So yeah, Beverly Crusher has informed him that Shinzon is actually slowly dying of accelerated aging as a result of him being cloned. The only thing that will restore him is a full transfusion of Picard's blood. Hence why, I mean, it's told that, doesn't Shinzon plant B4 on the planet to actually lure Picard to part of space, and then because they're on that planet, they're the closest ship to Romulus, and he somehow knew that the Federation would get the Enterprise to go to Romulus to rendezvous, and that would draw Picard there. Like, it's a very long way to get someone to you, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a very cliched bad guy thing, you know. He finally gets Picard there, and then they're having dinner together, like you were saying. And when you figure out all this plan of his, you just thought, why didn't you just nab him back when you guys were just having a nice cordial dinner? Catch him off guard. Like, why'd you talk to him about the history of the Picards and blah, blah, blah? Like, why would you care? You're going to die. And you need this guy, so just get him while he is preoccupied.
I want to know what it means to be human. The Riemanns have given me a future. But you can tell me about my past.
I can tell you about my past.
Were we Picards always warriors?
I think of myself as an explorer.
Well, were we always explorers?
I was the first Picard to leave our solar system. It caused quite a stir in the family. But I'd spent my youth
looking up at the stars, dreaming about what was up there. About
new worlds. I'm trying to believe you, Shinzon. If there is one ideal that the Federation holds most dear, it is that all men, all races can be united. What better example? A Starfleet captain standing in the Romulan Senate. Nothing would make me more proud than to take your hand in friendship. In time, when that trust has been earned.
No, you did right. Shinzon also transports B4 aboard the Skibbertar, revealing Shinzon was actually behind the placing of B4 on Kalaris 3 to lure Picard to Romulus. However, B4 reveals himself to actually be Data, which we mentioned earlier on. He actually rescues Picard and they make their escape back to the ship, realizing that the Skibbertar has weaponized a Thalaron emitter with enough power to destroy all life forms in a fleet of ships as well as an entire planet. Data deduces that Shinzon is using the warship to conquer the Federation and actually destroy Earth. So it's when they kind of discover this very convoluted, like it's a very important piece of the narrative, but it's convoluted, weaponized Thalaron emitter. Like what excuse my language, but what the fuck? Like,
Yeah, and of course the whole thing with Data and B4, like they do this whole thing about like Data putting his memories into B4 to sort of help him be more like Data. And at the end of the day, when Data comes over and saves Picard after he's faced off against Shinzon, I kind of wish it was the reverse. Like it ended up being that B4 went over there and saved him, because of the humanity given to him by Data. Like, that would have been a lot more satisfying. But as it stands, it turns out that Data was the one who sacrificed himself. And it's like I said at the beginning there, it's just not very impactful, I kind of wish it didn't happen. I like Data as a character, but it just wasn't impactful at all, the way he sacrificed himself.
But they cheated. I mean, if B4 wasn't in existence and they did that little pass off right at the end of the film where they implied that Data was coming back, it would have been more impactful. If they really wanted to kind of get rid of the character, just get rid of him. Don't kind of allude to the fact that he's going to return because B4 is going to attain all these memories eventually and actually turn into essentially the same character, and then have Picard kind of smirking to himself over it. It just felt strange, and you're right, it wasn't very impactful, and it should have been impactful because Data is an important character. He's not no one, man. He's like he's Commander Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Like he's the go-to guy in so many of their kind of like big great missions and great episodes, and to have him kind of not have this impactful death, it's a bit disappointing.
Exactly. And he is, for all intensive purposes, an immortal character who could have shown up in any Star Trek iteration.
Yeah, that's right.
So
anyway,
it's
interesting.
It's just not. But at the end of the day, manages to impale Shinzon because the guy has just like slowly deteriorated. In every other scene that we go back to him, he's looking a little worse.
There was a time you looked at the stars and dreamed of what might be.
Childish dreams, Captain. Lost in the dilithium mines of Remus. I am what you see now.
I see more than that. I see what you could be. The man who is Shinzon of Remus and Jean-Luc Picard could never exterminate the population of an entire planet. He's better than that.
He is what his life has made him.
Then what will you do with that life?
Waste it in a blaze of hatred.
There is a better way.
It's too late.
Never, never. You still have a choice. Make the right one now.
I can't fight what I am.
Yes, you can.
I'll show you my true nature. Our nature. And as Earth dies, remember I will always, forever be Shinzon of Remus. And my voice shall echo through time long after yours has faded to a dim memory.
Yeah, like don't they have like a knife fight or something? Like there's a knife involved, and
some sort of like large sharp object just impales him through the stomach.
I think I read today in my trivia that the knife was made by the same guy that was behind the knife in Rambo 3.
What? Random.
Yeah, I know, how random is that?
Yeah, but all's well.
So yeah, I mean, we could go into the details of the exactly how it is, but to cut a long story short, Picard actually kills, you're right, he kind of kills Shinzon by impaling him through the abdomen with a part of a metallic support strut. Yeah, and Data arrives with a single-use personal transporter. I'm not too sure why they couldn't make two of those, using it to quickly beam the captain back to the Enterprise before firing his phaser at the Thalaron generator and actually destroying the ship at the cost of his own life.
So that's pretty much the end. They all have a bit of a somber moment where they all have a toast to absent friends. And Riker's off to captain the USS Titan.
And again, talking about like not making light of things, but Data's death required a little bit more than that. I mean, God, when Spock died, man, at the end of Wrath of Khan, they had a whole bloody film, Search for Spock, the next one, as a bit of a tribute to him. I mean, Data gets a 2-minute sequence at the end of the movie when they're all kind of looking at each other, and doesn't Riker speak up? It's all very somber, and Riker kind of speaks up and goes, "You know what? I remember the first time when I met Data, he was standing by a river and he was whistling a tune."
Yeah, and that was the first episode of TNG.
Yeah, that's right. Encounter at Farpoint. And I can't remember what song you were singing, but yeah, and they all start kind of giggling a little bit. And Picard, yeah, you're right, with the severely damaged Enterprise is actually under repair in space dock around Earth's orbit. Picard actually bids farewell to newly promoted Captain Riker, who, as you mentioned, is off to command the USS Titan to begin a possible peace negotiation mission with the Romulans.
Will,
Permission to disembark, sir.
granted. So, where's the Titan off to?
The neutral zone. We're heading up the new task force. Apparently, the Romulans are interested in talking.
Well, I can't think of a better man for the job. If I may, just a word of advice about your first command.
Anything.
When your first officer insists that you can't go on away missions,
Ignore him. I intend to. Serving with you has been an honor.
the honor was mine, Captain.
Picard then meets with android B4, whereupon he discovers that Data has succeeded in copying the neural net into B4's positronic matrix not long before his death. Picard then actually walks down the corridor smiling with the knowledge that one day Data will return. And that's it. And that's when we leave all these great characters.
Yep, it's unfortunate because, back when we left the crew of the original series, aside from Generations where a few of them came back, it felt like a heartfelt goodbye, like a job well done, see you next time kind of thing. This just ends. It's just ended. This is the last time I'm going to see TNG. Go on.
Yeah, I know. It's really sad that we've kind of come to the end of this, but we still have 2 films left to go in our series.
We do indeed.
And it's a game changer. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. But I'm looking forward to getting into them, actually. There's a very different perspective, isn't there?
Very much so. Okay, so recommend, not recommend?
As far as Nemesis is concerned, I would kind of give it like maybe a Warp 5 recommend. That's kind of where I'm sitting with it. I don't think I hated it or disliked it maybe as much as you did, I think.
Well, you're thinking higher of it than you did Insurrection.
Yeah, I definitely like this one more than Insurrection, and that's saying something, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm probably just about the same level as I was with Insurrection. The effects were fine. The story was just whatever. Tom Hardy was whatever. And Data at the end was whatever.
And it definitely kind of felt like the Next Generation crew were kind of coming to the end of their story. a little bit, don't you think? I feel like they were kind of running out of stories a bit for this crew, like especially with all the different TV shows, kind of in Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and all these actors kind of popping up, and then especially with Worf over in DS9, they were really struggling to kind of get him back into the fold a little bit. So I don't think Nemesis was awful. I think it had some kind of plot holes in it, and it was a bit of a trial at times, but I was able to forgive part of it and just watch it as a Star Trek story, and yeah, I didn't mind it so much.
Yeah, like I was saying about how they didn't really do like a heartfelt goodbye for it. It was more like, hey, let's just test the waters to see if people still want it. And if they do, then maybe we'll make more.
It would have been interesting, though, if they didn't hire Stuart Baird and maybe got Jonathan Frakes or a different director that had a bit more like Star Trek-y kind of chops, if you know what I mean. So I think that would have made a difference. So, I mean, we'll never know, will we?
Exactly. So, getting into our civilians log here, we do have a bit of feedback that came in on the Facebook page from Mike Romulus Lamontaine. I'm butchering that.
Yeah.
I'm butchering that. I'm sorry, Mike.
you did your best, mate. It's all right.
But he wrote, I loved the actress who played Commander Denatra. I don't dislike Tom Hardy, but trying to pass him off as Picard's clone or younger self was a bit of a stretch. And who is Stuart Baird? Why not someone with more directing experience?
Yeah, I kind of couldn't agree more with you. Commander Denatra, I kind of found her to be an interesting character that was a little underused, truthfully. I'm kind of, man, as I said before, I would love to see the longer version of this film with all those character moments between the Enterprise crew and possibly the Romulans and Commander Denatra in a more kind of cohesive thing that wasn't so focused on Shinzon and Picard relentlessly. I think it might be a better film, truthfully, because as we discussed earlier, Next Generation is always based on character moments. So to actually see that in this movie would have been interesting.
Yes, it would indeed. But second bit of feedback we got here, we actually got an email from our good friend Dewey Linley.
Nice.
Very exciting. And this is quite lengthy too, because she gets into like a bunch of the movies we've talked about. So let's delve into this.
Cool.
She writes, hello, Corey and Nathan. I'm starting to get sad that we don't have very much Star Trek movies left. I can also look at the bright side and remember that everything after First Contact is downhill. So it's not the end of the world that there's not many left. The worst being Into Darkness, and yes, it's worse than Insurrection or Nemesis.
Wow. Wow, that's a
tough call.
That's a big call.
We'll have to wait and see. What do you think on that?
Hey, I haven't seen the movie, so we'll have to find out, man.
Yeah, she says, I hope you guys start another great rewatch series. How about Battlestar Galactica?
There's a few, let's just say we're not giving the game away, but there's a few options that are being talked about currently. So we'll see what happens there.
Although it's a bit late to comment on First Contact, I still wanted to share my thoughts as it is my favorite Star Trek movie. I recall seeing this movie with my then boyfriend and now husband, who has introduced me to Star Trek, in a local theater. I knew a bit about Star Trek, but not a whole lot. Although I was super stressed out throughout the movie as the Borg scared the crap out of me, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can't handle scary things. I even got scared and screamed like an idiot when we went to see Scary Movie 4 in the theater. Yes, I'm a well-known wimp.
I do agree with you, Dewey, that the Borg are a very scary villain. Like all jokes aside, when you actually think about what they do, it's pretty full on.
It is, yeah. Especially given that I fell asleep trying to watch both Star Wars episodes 4 and 5. This was a pleasant surprise. I can hold my comment on that.
That's all right.
As Corey mentioned, this movie was referenced in the TV show Enterprise. Captain Archer mentioned at one point that he recalled reading something of Dr. Cochrane, but most had dismissed it as one of his crazy stories, and he has been known to be a bit kooky. Apparently, Cochrane tries to tell people about how some cyborg from the future tried to change the past or something like that. The really cool reference to this movie was actually from another episode of Enterprise in the Mirror Universe. Spoiler alert if you haven't already seen it yet. Well, I haven't seen it, so I'm going to get spoiled. But in that version, humans attack the Vulcans after they make their first contact, and their history since then takes a different route. Vulcans are essentially slaves, more so to humans.
That's interesting. I've never seen that episode. I should track it down. As I said, I'm kind of making my way through Enterprise at the moment. And I do recommend you do it too, Corey. Eventually, I know you've got a lot on your plate. Eventually, in the years to come, when you finally put that to the side, maybe give it a go.
Yeah. And she does go on to say, Corey, please listen to Nathan and give DS9 a try. It's absolutely amazing. Enterprise is pretty good too, especially seasons 3 and 4. So there's a bit to get into. But she continues. Also, Deanna and Riker being quote-unquote fuck buddies.
Yeah, I like
Corey?
that too. It made me laugh.
I laughed out loud at that brilliant and eloquent analogy. Also, your impression of drunk Troy. Okay, here we go. I'm that crack was simply masterful. You most definitely are back on the impressions duty, although both of your Picard impressions were outstanding.
Thank you. All those years at acting school have paid off. Off.
That whole 2-hour course.
Yeah, that whole 2-hour online course.
Okay, so now on to Insurrection. So honestly, this wasn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, it still beats Nemesis or Into Darkness, hands down, any day. It just feels like a TV episode that's not very memorable.
But wouldn't you argue that it should be memorable, though? Because it's a movie. It should be memorable. It's like it's meant to be cinematic. And
that's what I said. It was like a TV episode, a filler episode at that. Sure, I'll watch it if it comes on TV and there's nothing else on, but I am mostly in agreement with you fine gentlemen's analysis. Troy and Riker have no chemistry other than they feel more like a brother and sister, which is not the feel I want to get from them, the leading romance couple in the movie. Again, as Corey said last week, they are just fuck buddies, I guess. For next week, or this week, depending on your definition of when we're reading this, there's just no way I can work up to the courage to watch Nemesis ever again, and I applaud you watching this movie in service to this fine podcast. But it's still TNG in the real Star Trek universe without J.J. Abrams. She also goes on to say that we don't need to read this rant, but we've done it anyway.
We just did.
Yeah. Just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys. Thanks for the great podcast as usual. I'm looking forward to the next episode. I just remember a very Sears photo booth-like quality of the wedding backdrops. That's kind of true. And the most incredibly awkward make-out scene between Riker and Troy. It's like Riker wants to push through her with the most violent pressing of lips. So bad.
Don't forget, Riker is a guy that shaves for his woman. You know, his woman kind of sort of says, "Hey man, like I've never kissed you with a beard before," and he just like the next scene he doesn't have a beard. And you know what? In Nemesis, the beard comes back.
At least they are finally able to enjoy their golden years together. Oh, and when did Wesley come back to Starfleet after leaving to be a traveler? It's true. Yeah, he went off to some sort of astral plane. I'm not even going to go.
Did he? I can't remember. Didn't he go to Starfleet or something like that? Or was there another story there?
Yeah, there was that whole thing with the traveler. If you remember, he went off with that guy.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
So him being at the wedding really makes no sense.
Okay.
Just like Picard's family, Data is alive and well in my version of Star Trek universe. Maybe they are making space wine together by now. Take care, guys, and I can't wait for the next episode. Dewey.
Nice. Great email.
So, that was a great email.
That was a great email. Well done. That would have taken time to put together. And you know what? All jokes aside, we appreciate the feedback. So it's great.
Yes. And of course, we wish we had more of it. So thank you, Dewey, for a very long email.
And thank you, Mike, for your thoughts too.
Of course. Okay, so moving on to a great game we're playing on social media of Who Said This, just for funsies. We put out a quote on our social media and you guys take a guess, or if you know it, just put it out there that you know. But we have a new line this week, which is from Nemesis. So give me a count in.
This is a good one too, so yeah, this is a good line. Anyway, you ready? 3, 2, 1, scene.
I do not think it is appropriate for a Starfleet officer to appear naked.
Nice. So if you have the answer to that quote, use the hashtag rewatch quote on Twitter and we will find you.
Yes, and of course we'll put it out on the Facebook page as well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it'd be good, let us know if you know the answer.
Okay, so next week we're on to the home stretch for the Star Trek movies.
The controversial 2009 reboot of Star Trek. It's going to be a fun talk.
I think it's going to be epic.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be watching the film maybe tomorrow or the next night, so it should be good.
I think I might watch it quite soon as well.
That's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at Rewatch Pod and visit our webpage rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And remember, you can always write us an email just like Dewey did, or you can even record a voice message and send it to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. It's always very helpful and helps build up the listenership and that listener interaction that we love.
I've said it before, if you like the show, it takes a minute and it's really helpful. So if you could do it, that'd be great.
Okay. Nathan, thank you for joining me for this discussion.
I know, and you know what? I didn't expect this to be such an epic discussion, but it really kind of got on. It was good. It was great.
Yeah, awesome.
Until next week.
Yes, until next time, I'll just say I will always be puzzled by the human predilection for piloting vehicles at unsafe velocities.
And can you learn to see in the dark?
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended. The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Copyright 2015, The Rewatch Podcast.